Hello and welcome to the My Career podcast with Pathway CTM. I'm your host today, Chris McNamara, founder and CEO of Pathway CTM. I'm here with Ben Allen, founder and CEO of OOMPH Wellness Limited. I'm really keen to get Ben on the sofa today because he started a business and he sold a business. It's a social enterprise that does good. So we want to get into the nitty gritty about how he did that today. So Ben, welcome to the sofa.
Brilliant. Thank you for having me on the podcast, Chris.
Brilliant, Ben. So OOMPH Wellness, just so we know what that does, just top line, what sort of business is that?
OOMPH is a social enterprise designed to improve the quality of life for older and vulnerable people. We work across the UK, supporting people in care homes. There's three main parts to the business. There's a training arm to the business, there's a technology arm to the business, and historically there's been a transport arm to the business. Recently, the training part and the technology part has been sold to one of the main data companies in the care sector called Person-Centered Software.
Amazing. And so Ben, there's so much to go through with you, and you're a successful business person. But I just want to set the scene really, because 40% of self-made millionaires are dyslexic, and that's a reference that I've mentioned to you off the podcast, because you are dyslexic, Ben, and you have made your efforts in business just from nothing, right?
Exactly, yes. So I personally see my dyslexia as one of my superpowers. I definitely think differently. Maybe I'm not as academically strong as some people, but where I lack in academic skills, I'm far more creative, incredibly driven. And yeah, pleased to be part of the 40%.
Love it. So let's bring it right back to school, because a lot of our audience are young people, like trying to make their way in life and figure out what they want to do. So really bring it back to them, really. So when did your journey start? When would you like to start off with us? Was it when you realised in school you wanted to do something, or was it that you weren't a certain way in school? How far can we go back?
Well, I guess at school, I went to school in central Scotland. So I went to a school where it was, a normal school, so it certainly wasn't a private school. We did lots of sports, so we were focused far more on sport than academic attainment. And from a young age, we learned how to be incredibly competitive. So whether that was winning in races with my brother, whether that be sliding competitions, everything was about competition. So we were competitive children. The schooling, we were lucky. We grew up at a beautiful small village with a small school. It was an idyllic place to grow up. But then moved down to Scarborough when I was 17. And at 17, then I didn't want to resit a year to go to university. And I should say I did resit a year in high school after going to the wrong high school that couldn't support me with my dyslexia. So instead, redid a year and went to a different high school. So I didn't want to redo another year when moving down to England. So then went straight to university at 17 to do a 4-year degree rather than a 3-year degree. And if I'm honest about it, the only reason I went to university was not because of the qualification that I was going for. It was because moving down to England from Scotland as a 17-year-old, I didn't know anyone. And I figured it was a good way to make friends. And I went to university in the town where where my parents bought a hotel. So that's what sort of grounded me in the Scarborough area. But today, would I spend the £8,000 on the degree on the degree I took? Probably not. I went to university at a time when doing a degree was less than £2,000 a year.
Wow. Well, young people are looking at more like £50,000 these days.
Yeah. It's a shocking statistic.
And Ben, when we look at dyslexia from your point of view, there's many different types. What did dyslexia mean for you in school, and how did it maybe hold you back?
Well, I certainly read slower than the average person. So I read quite slowly. I struggled with maths at school. But then I should say, but on the other side, I was very good at sport. I was very good at in craft, like a craft work or in tech stuff like that. So I was very weak in some areas and very strong in others. And naturally in life, I've always learned to focus on the areas that I'm strong and kind of get people to help me on the areas where I'm weak. And at school, I had a reader and a scribe. I think that probably actually taught me from quite a young age that, delegate the things which you're not good at, delegate the reading to someone else, delegate the writing to someone else, and all I need to do is focus on the speaking. And I carried that forwards throughout my career.
So again, using what you have and making it worked for you and adding value to what you're doing, really, because being good at delegating is a key skill as a CEO, I'm sure.
I think it's my number one skill. I would say I'm pretty awful at most things. So fortunately within the business, I really do believe that everybody is better than me. But the one thing that I am very good at is delegating.
It makes your life easier, I'm sure, Ben.
For sure.
And so just before we leave schooling, just to hit you with a stat here. So 86% of like big employers don't recruit by subject discipline. They don't really mind what you're studying. Yet a lot of teachers are saying, you need to study X, Y, Z to keep your options open, etc. Where do you fall on that? Because I almost want from you a message to young people who might be doing stuff that they don't really want to be doing. They're not that driven and they're not that into it, and they may be miserable doing it. What would you say to those young people?
Well, I think firstly you should always just do what you love. I mean, I strongly believe that sitting in a classroom studying something that you've got absolutely no interest in is a thankless task. Whereas if you just focus on something that you love, you'll become expert at it. If you take me, for example, I loved exercise and I built a career around exercise, and very, very few people would have been able to see the success that OOMPH had when it started off by people doing cheerleading in care homes with older people. And we turned that into a very large business. But it just shows if you focus on doing something that you love, it can take you anywhere. And versus ticking all the boxes with the right academic attainment.
And that's your route.
For sure.
Yeah. And let's talk about the fitness side. So you went to university. Just talk a little bit more about how you became a bit of an expert in the fitness space.
Yeah, so I went to university, studied sport and leisure management. So a pretty normal degree. It certainly wasn't a flash degree at all. I did pretty awfully at it, so I got a 2-2, so a classic Desmond. And I thought the whole way through university, though, I had a full-time job. So I worked for an international school. So I worked for a language school called English Venture. And I think that was probably the most important thing that happened to me, was I worked for this amazing entrepreneur. So I was at university studying, but then when I wasn't there, I was going to Germany working for this international school and this entrepreneur called Voin, who was very competitive, very fit, athletic guy, and obviously had his business. I was learning from him what life could be like as an entrepreneurial person. And that was really great. And then going from there into I guess the wider degree, I focused far more on what life was going to be like after the degree rather than the degree itself.
And often we get told in life you need to go into work, start earning, saving for a house. Did you have any sort of flexibility around your studies and any travel that you managed to fit in there, or did you go straight into start a business, being an entrepreneur?
No, not at all. So basically, when I was at university, I travelled a lot. So first, as I say, I worked for the international school. That was throughout university. When I qualified, or it's not qualified, but sort of got the degree, I then went off travelling. So I went travelling with my brother. So we went away for a few months. I'd come back, and then at that time when I came back, I decided to do a personal training qualification. Because I wanted to be able to essentially fund my travels. So I'd come back, did the qualification, passed the qualification, did about 3 months personal training, saved up enough money to go traveling again, came back, did some more personal training, went traveling again. So for the first 4 years after university, I spent pretty much 50% of my time traveling and 50% of my time working.
Amazing. Okay. And when did the business start forming in your head? Or maybe the question is, when did you start looking into the care sector, which is what it was in? What came first?
Sure. So I was very fortunate. As a personal trainer, I was lucky to work with incredibly wealthy people. So by pure chance, so I was working in Fitness First York as a PT. And one of my clients was a guy called Peter Rhodes. And I didn't really know much about him. He turned up to the PT sessions in his Doc Marten boots, his ripped shorts, and his ripped T-shirt, and generally just looked pretty rough. I was like, and for the first 2 sessions, he didn't pay me. Anyway, third session was coming up, and he didn't turn up to the session. Apology text message saying, "Sorry, Ben, can't come back, but I've moved to Australia. Let me know if you're ever in Australia." So I didn't really think anything of it. But Luke and I were traveling again, and we ran out of money actually in Malaysia, and our next stop was Australia. And this guy, Peter Rhodes, owed me the equivalent of two PT sessions in money. So I figured if I got in touch with him, he could provide me free accommodation for a night whilst we got settled in Australia. Turns out that Peter was a multi-millionaire pharmaceutical drug inventor, and he flew us to the Great Barrier Reef when we landed into Australia. So it just shows it's always worth keeping a good network. But it's through Peter that I ended up working around the world as a personal trainer with him and his family. But from there, I built a bit of a reputation for that, and then got headhunted to go to work for the European Institute of Fitness, where I trained people to become personal trainers. That was in Spain. And then from there, I did a bit of guest lecturing for the Australian Institute of Sport. And it was in those roles that I really specialised in special populations, so exercise for people for stroke rehab, cancer rehab, obesity, diabetes, older people, dementia. So I had a good grounding there, and I really understood the business of fitness. And at that point, I decided, right, do I want to work for people? I was having a nice time working in Spain and then guest lecturing in Australia. Did I want to do that? Or did I want to work for myself? And decided I wanted to work for myself. And that was the moment.
Amazing. So that's a great build up with your skill set and how you got to where you started the business. What was the catalyst? So when did you start the business? Can you remember, what was your first memory of this is OOMPH Wellness?
Well, I can remember the moment where I sort of came up with the idea. I was walking along, I think it was along a riverbank in Brisbane, and thinking, right, I don't want to work for these people. I do want to work for myself, but what am I going to do? And thinking, Scarborough's got quite a lot of care homes, and I know a bit about exercise, and I reckon I can train up people to go into care homes to deliver these exercise classes. And I thought, right, that's what I'm going to do. And I can also remember ringing my parents to say, I'm going to do this. And my parents tell me that, asking me what was I thinking, leaving a very good job to come back to the UK to move back in with them to go door-to-door selling in Scarborough. So yeah, but the very first care home I went to once I got back to the UK was directly opposite my parents' house. A small care home in Scarborough, and they said yes, and that really sort of opened up the opportunity. I think if they said no, I would be back off working for somebody again. But they said yes, and that sort of created the pathway.
And so let's just talk about that in a little bit more detail. So you've flown back to Scarborough, family home, I'm guessing.
Yep.
And so you fly back on the Monday, and what, after your jet lag on the Friday, you just walk into a care home. Just talk us through the emotions and what you were thinking there, and walking into a care home to do what? What were you expecting?
Yeah, so bear in mind I'd never been in a care home before, so I didn't really know what to expect. And for those of you who haven't been in a care home before, it's a pretty scary place to go initially. But yeah, literally turned up to the door of the care home. They weren't expecting me, knocked on the door and asked to meet the manager, and said, I really believe that we can make a difference to older people's lives through high quality structured exercise. Do you want to give it a go? And they fortunately said yes, and it turned out that there was a massive gap in the market for exercise for older people. I mean, in the UK, less than 7% of older people meet the World Health Organization guidelines for physical activity. At the time, I didn't know that. Turns out that was a 93% opportunity, and I really focused on hitting it.
So Ben, your example, you just went with action and the rest followed. Whereas I hear a lot of people who do a lot of business plans but never take action. What's your view on the market around entrepreneurs that never get going?
They're not entrepreneurs. I think that you need to be action oriented. Everything that I've done has been basically nothing. Or you can obviously join the dots looking backwards, but there hasn't been a master business plan there. I've followed my nose. I saw there was an opportunity in exercise. I sent personal trainers into care homes to deliver exercise classes. I then learnt from the care homes that actually the best thing to do was to train the staff in the care homes rather than training up people to go into the care homes. So I started training up staff in care homes, how to deliver exercise, but also looking after wider wellness within care homes. We then saw that there's a big issue around older people getting out of care homes on days out. So I launched a bus company to take those older people on days out. We then saw over COVID there was a big issue around sort of getting content to care workers to support the delivery of care whilst the pandemic was going on. So we built a content platform for them. Everything was responsive. You know, I wasn't sat back in some office coming up with a master business plan. Personally, I think that there are probably a load of geniuses who can do that, and they'd have made half the mistakes I made. But I am who I am, and I'm always going to go out and get it versus sit there and theorize about the potential upsides and downsides.
And you did it.
And I did it, yeah.
Ben, so they said yes.
Yep.
What are you feeling when you go back to your house there? You're thinking, goodness, what am I going to do now? How did you then deliver it?
Yeah, well, I delivered the first classes, so I was the salesman, I was the delivery person, I was the admin, I was the finance, so I did everything initially. Then I went to sold to the next care home down the road, then the next care home down the road, and I saw that they more were coming on board and thought, right, am I the delivery person or am I the salesperson? So I think, right, I'm going to be the salesperson. And I then subcontracted people to deliver the exercise classes for me, and I trained them how to do it. And then we grew that, so then I kept selling. So I sold into Scarborough, I sold into Whitby, into Bridlington, into Malton, into York. And bear in mind, this is door-to-door selling. This isn't sort of me going to meet a corporate. I'm going to the door of the care home saying, I think this is a good idea. What do you think? And that was at the time the business plan. I got to meet lots of care homes, and then obviously the business model evolved, and went into training staff, and I matured with it. But the key point was I wanted to make myself redundant from every role. I didn't want to be the exercise guy, so then I hired people to become the exercise people. I ultimately didn't want to be the salesperson, so I hired a sales team. I definitely didn't want to be the finance person, so I hired a finance person. And I really focused on those people being at every time I made that hire that they had to be better than me, because I didn't want to be their manager. I knew that I would be an awful manager, so they had to be pretty great at the job.
And what's your lesson for young people listening to this, thinking I couldn't do what Ben did there?
Well, I think that the bar is, the bar with me is pretty low. I'm a pretty normal guy who got got no A levels, got a 2.2 degree, got pretty normal the equivalent of GCSE results. So I wouldn't say I had any sort of flash qualifications. What the main thing that I had was drive, and I think that's what young people should understand. Like, just because you don't academically attain doesn't mean you're not going to be successful. I'm really driven.
Yeah, no, it's a great story. So now you've got OOMPH Wellness Limited. What made you come up with the name, by the way? What does that stand for?
Stands for Our Organisation Makes People Happy, and that's what we do every day.
Wow. Social enterprise, right? Social
enterprise. So we evidence all of our impact. We redistribute the majority of the profits back to the social cause. We exist to make people's lives better.
And so talk me through where you were at pre-COVID. How many people did you employ? Where was your office, etc.?
Yeah, so prior to COVID, we had 98 people, the majority of which were drivers. So 30 buses, 60 drivers, 10 trainers, central staff. So quite a big team. Offices in Wimbledon at the time, I think, or was it Surbiton? A mix of both, probably. And growing really quickly. So we've grown from sort of this mad idea of exercise changing the care sector to this quite big health and wellness, or the largest health and wellness business for older people in the UK, and growing really quite quickly. We had signed heads of terms on raising quite a few £1 million to grow the business from 30 buses to 100 buses, and really kick the business on. And of course, COVID hit, and the deal fell through, and life changed quite dramatically.
And so, Ben, what we're talking about there is an exit from a business, right? So when you start a business, you're meant to have the exit in mind, aren't you? So Just talk us through what that means and what it meant for you.
Yeah, so raising that round of finance would have fundamentally changed my life at the time. I'd worked pretty much non-stop for 8 years. So I'd obviously built the business, but to build the business, I'd probably worked harder than most people should work. So I'd moved something like 10 times with the company. So trying to grow in different areas of the UK, moved the business down to London, very focused. And then we got to this point where the business had grown, it matured, and was making money, and we'd raise this on paper, raise this private equity round of financing, which meant that I would get a chunk of money myself, which would change my life, and it'd give the business enough funding to bring in a much bigger management team and to really scale up. So it was quite fundamental. It would have been a big change.
So that's where you built up to, which was what you wanted from the business, creating great impact and then selling it and making even more impact and benefiting yourself.
Yeah.
Then COVID happened. Just describe the impact of COVID in the time that we do have that we can hear.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a bit of a catastrophe. So the deal fell through. This is all before furlough was invented. So the care sector went into lockdown long before furlough was invented, or before the general population would have even recognised COVID. So the deal fell through. The care sector went into lockdown, and I was sat there with 30 buses, 60 drivers, 10 trainers, without any ability to pay them because 90% of our income just dried up on the day. So you suddenly go from this situation where you've got this fantastic business, it's growing incredibly quickly, you're raising finance, you're getting lots and lots of money yourself in the process, which could buy you a nice house or certainly change the way you live in quite a significant way, and then that just falls apart. And instead, what you're doing is literally 2 weeks after me signing those heads of terms, 90 of the 98 people were made redundant. So we needed to let 90 staff go. Then had a big problem because of the buses. A minibus will cost, on average, about call it £1,400 a month. We had 30 of them, so call it 40 grand a month of cash going out the bank without any money coming into the bank. So that was a big problem. So we had to go to the bank where the leases were held and basically convince them that to put them create a break in the contract and put the contract on pause, so we didn't have to pay them for a few months. Then I had to go out and sell all those minibuses so we could get out of that catastrophe. We had to buy one of our investors out who didn't believe that the business could get through it. I need to go into administration meetings with administrators on a pretty much every other day basis. So pretty stressful, pretty bad.
Wow. And what was the one thing you're most proud of getting through that COVID period?
Well, I think we were incredibly resilient. I'm taking it day by day. So I think the best decision we made was, at the time, we didn't think that COVID was going to be a short-term thing. A lot of people did. And we said, okay, this is going to be a big problem. It's going to last for a long time, and the care sector will be nervous for a much longer time, even after COVID goes away. And so we need to take radical action today. And so if we didn't do that, and we were hopeful about COVID only being a short-term thing, we'd have 100% gone bankrupt. So we took radical action very, very quickly, which is obviously very hard for the people we made redundant, and it was very hard for my health and other people as well. So it was a very hard period. The next thing that we did, which I thought was very good, was we listened to the clients. So we did have a very large customer base. They just weren't paying us because they weren't receiving a service. We couldn't obviously take older people out of care homes, and we couldn't send people into the care homes, so there was no service to be delivered. But what they did do is they provided us with a lot of feedback on the support they did need. And that was testament to the quality of the relationships that we had with those clients. So we were able to learn very, very quickly that the staff within the care homes were very stretched themselves, that the older people in the care homes were incredibly isolated, and what they needed was a digital solution. So we managed to muster together £20,000 to build sort of a minimum viable product of essentially a content platform, think Netflix for wellness for older people. So a content platform that we loaded up with loads of content, from exercise content to activity content to music therapy content to art therapy content. And we went and sold that to our client base. So that was good that we listened to the clients. And then we went and sold it, and we sold it hard. So I think one of the things which I'm sure is coming across is I like sales, and I'm pretty driven. And we drove the team incredibly hard over the COVID period, the remaining team members, to firstly get the content onto this platform very quickly and sell it to a lot of people quickly. Unfortunately, we sold it into about 1,400 care homes within 2 years, which is about 70,000, maybe 80,000 people using the product, which obviously is great because it's massively improved their lives and almost built an entirely new business at the most distressed point a business could ever be.
Wow, I was going to say the same aims and objectives, but a completely different business and how to get there.
Yeah.
And then when you say that out loud and you've told that story, how does it make you feel?
obviously it's a mix of emotions. I mean, at the time, I reflect on how stressful it was at the time. That was not good for me. But looking at the pride of the business and the team to be able to come through, it was quite terrific, and to grow it as quickly as we did, and to build as much value as we did for the shareholders of the business as quickly as we did was really quite terrific.
And just to try and get under the skin of Ben Allen here, did you ever doubt yourself over that period? Did you think you couldn't do it, and did you think you were going to be a complete failure at any time? Any of those things?
So I definitely thought that there was the river was too big to bridge across. So I was looking at this huge catastrophe, thinking, oh, is this actually going to work? Or are we even going to come up with an idea that's going to work? So I can remember speaking to some of my closer clients and suppliers, like we work closely with Deloitte and people like that, and talking to them about what happens if this falls apart. Will you guys give me a job? Unfortunately, they were quite supportive, but they were saying, Ben, we don't think it's going to fall apart, but yes, if you do need a job, you can certainly talk to us. But so there's definitely fear there. But then fear is a pretty good thing, because if you don't have fear, you're not going to sort of... I've got a huge fear of failure. I absolutely hate the idea of failing. So if OOMPH was going to fall over, I needed to make sure that I was going to succeed. So that was one thing. But then actually, that was a quite selfish in some ways intent. And then I spent a bit more time on Zoom with the team, because obviously you couldn't meet them face to face. I was like, no, we're gonna really focus on this. We're gonna do it. And it became more and more sort of focused on not failing. And I'd say pretty driven by the rage of the situation that I'd got myself into with COVID. I was amazingly annoyed that everything I'd worked for 8 years had collapsed, and I was sort of driven by that to make sure I succeeded.
It's amazing. It's the unknown, and it's the relentless drive to just not give up.
Yeah,
is what I'm getting from this. And surely we can put that into any aspects of our lives.
Yeah, definitely. But that certainly is not always a good thing. You know, I'm very driven. I'm pretty single-minded, and that can be hugely advantageous in some situations, but also it can definitely let you down in others.
And Ben, so you have sold your business eventually, which is, I guess, well, I want to know, is that the end of the line? Is that when it stops? Talk us through that and how you've managed to do that, and I guess the feeling that you've got now, because it's quite recent this year.
Yeah, so sold the business earlier this year, which was a really great feeling. So one of the things with the platform that we built, we integrated it into care planning software. So this is like the way you manage the data within care homes and monitor every care interaction. One of the company that we integrated with is the biggest in the market, and they wanted to buy us. So that was great. And for all the shareholders and supporters of OOMPH who have been part of the business for a long time, that allowed them to sort of realize the success of the business, which was really good. Then it comes down to sort of, is it the end of the line? Definitely not. So the guys at Person Centered Software are very keen for me to stay on with them for a bit, go over to Australia to help them launch their business into Australia properly. So I'll be looking into that over the next few months. So that could be super exciting. I retain my bus company, so I've still got my buses. Just started to build that back up again from 0, so back to 3 buses, not quite at 30 again yet, but 3 buses, running really well, running really profitably. I can see a pathway back to 20, 30 buses probably, and that can be a really great business in its own right. I'm doing a bit of consultancy work as well, but I don't think I'll ever not work. I'm very keen never to work as hard as I had to work over COVID again, and I'll probably within the businesses that I've still got now, I'd probably look to have people running those businesses for me and me to be the chairman. But I always see myself being very much active in business.
But choosing what you do. Yeah,
exactly. Choosing what I do.
Through your hard work has enabled you to do that in the next stage of your life, I suppose.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm really lucky to firstly be in a situation where I suppose I've got a certain level of financial freedom, which is a huge luxury, which I don't take for granted at all. it means I can do things which I really enjoy doing. So whether that is doing my buses or going on a nice holiday or doing charity work. So I've got a charity which I was chairing for the last 6 years. I've literally just stepped down as chairman. So there are things which I really enjoy, and that I don't need to really worry about being paid super quickly for. So that's good. And then and then I guess outside of the whole work thing, it means I can go on more holidays and enjoy more time off and doing different things.
It's amazing. It's such an inspiration to hear the story, because that's what young people can aspire to be like, Ben, and hear that story and maybe follow in your footsteps. But I just want to end on, because we do need to wrap up. What advice would you have for those young people who might be listening to you or watching this and just thinking, what small steps can I start to take in my journey? I'm just at school at the minute, doing what I'm doing, maybe not even enjoying the curriculum that I've got there, but what can I do to try and be a bit more like Ben and start now?
Well, I would always caution people not to be like me, but I definitely think that people should just focus on what they love. I think so many people are forced down pathways of the route that their parents took, or the route that was expected of them, or the route that their teacher pushed them down, and they don't actually know why they're doing it for themselves. So firstly, do something that you really, really love, and you'll always be able to find a way to earn an income out of it. So that would be my first bit of advice. My second bit of advice would be surround yourself with great people who you really care about. You'll be the average of those people. So make sure that they're really great. Make sure you really care about them and they really care about you. And they'll learn more about that as they mature as well. And also take your chances. Most people say no to most things. One of the things which I'm absolutely sure about with myself is a big part of how I got lucky was just by constantly saying yes. And by constantly saying yes, I just put myself in front of good opportunities.
Brilliant. Ben, thanks so much for sharing your story today.
Cool. Thanks, Chris.